My name is Grace Portillo. I am event manager at Bring Ruckus. I've been helping creating some content and also organizing events since mid-April. Now I'm here with Stara Gipson.
Yeah, hi, I'm Stara Gipson. I currently am an account manager at Google, working with app developers, mostly in mobile gaming and retail.
That's awesome. So how did you start your career and how did you make your switch to tech?
Yeah, so when in college, I was a cognitive science major, and I focused mostly on neuroscience and computer science. And basically what that means in undergrad is you take a lot of computer science classes and a lot of neuroscience classes, and they never actually bring them together. So, but I knew after graduation that I wanted to work in tech, and I knew I wanted to work for Google. So I was that recent grad that applied to every entry-level position at Google, trying to get a job there. And I got a couple of interviews, but did not get any offers. But I knew I wanted to be in tech. So I took a role for a software sales role where I was in a call center making cold calls back to back during the day, and that it was a grind and it was not that fun, but it was kind of like a step in the door, and that's how I viewed it. And then from there, I went to a startup that was an interior design app. And that's where I kind of got a little more introduced to what technical expertise looked like in the tech field at that time. And I taught myself to code there. I built a couple websites for them, some infrastructures around data. And it was a challenging role, but it was very useful in terms of my career trajectory. And from there, I went over to Oracle, and that's kind of where I was introduced to the marketing side of things. I worked on the services side for email marketing, mostly with fast fashion brands. From there, then I also went to another startup, and I kind of think this was a big turning point in my career. And I love telling this story because I think that it really kind of just highlights the space in the industry at the time. I went to the 2016 Women's March, and it was in San Francisco, and it was like raining, and it was a moving day. And I met this woman who was in the march next to us, and she was like, "Hey, you want to come hang out in my office and like dry off and drink tea with like her group of friends and my group of friends?" And I went up there, and she worked for a startup, and I was like, "Wow, this office is great." And she's like, "You want a job?" And I was like, "Yeah." And that's where I kind of got introduced to growth marketing. So once I was there, I really got to kind of hone in on some growth marketing skills and kind of find my passion in the tech space. And then at that point, I got reached out to by Google to come work in their services side. So I think things do come full circle, and I was able to get some good experience. So that's got me to where I am today.
That's awesome. And also you're mentoring now as well for other women in tech. And I mean, I know that you're a wave mentor for Built by Girls and Women of Impact for Girls Inc. as well. Can you speak a bit more on this experience, how this has helped others, and also how this has enriched your career?
Yeah, so I think mentorship has been such a key point in my career, and how I've been able to find roles and also just kind of succeed in the roles that I'm at. And I cherish mentorship so much for that. And I think everyone should have a mentor, no matter what role or what position you are in your career. There's always someone who can teach you, and sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. But I'm a huge proponent of just having a mentor for everyone. So I wanted to make sure I could provide that same knowledge and leadership to a younger person or a person who's earlier in their career. So I started reaching out to different organizations around, and I found a home and Built by Girls and with Girls Inc. Especially, I love working with young women and getting them into the professional workspace, especially when it comes to tech. So I found really valuable relationships in those programs, and I try as hard as I can to kind of pass on the knowledge that I've learned to the next generation and make sure that they're, just as equipped. And I know one day they're going to be surpassing me, and that provides so much joy.
That's awesome. So going a bit back to your past experience, how do you think your past experience has helped you become a link between different teams, marketing, product, and engineering teams? How does your background play a role into
Yeah. So I like to think that, like, on paper, my career looks really kind of like segmented and it kind of jumps all over the place. But I think there's a lot of cohesion in between it, and I think it worked out that way for a reason. I'm kind of a big proponent of that ideal. And I think having a mix of small companies and larger companies really helped. The value that you get at a small company, I always go back to this, is like when I was sitting on the marketing team for a startup, it's nice to have the product and engineering teams right next to you. So if you have a marketing issue, you literally turn your chair around and ask a question to an engineer, ask a question to a PM. And that just provides so much insight to other organizations within the company, that then you can take those learnings and bring them somewhere else. So now when I'm at another large company like Oracle or Google, I have that insight and knowledge to how these other teams work, how their OKRs are built, what their goals are, so I can speak to them in their language and against what they're working towards to help our team as well. So that's been super helpful. And it's just kind of keeping that knowledge of how other teams are prioritizing to make sure that initiatives are getting done across the board.
Awesome. Great. What do you think are some of the skills that you need in order to be a key liaison between cross-functional teams?
Yeah, I think technical understanding is important, and what that means is, not everyone needs to know how to code. Not everyone needs to know, how to build something on the hardware side. But having the knowledge of what it takes to get it done is super important, because when it comes to kind of being that key liaison, a lot of it relies on project management. And you have to have some level of insight to know what other teams are doing, how long they're going to take, what resource it's going to use to be able to build that effective project planning. So I think having that technical understanding, and right alongside that comes kind of just knowing how to communicate effectively to those teams. Again, that kind of leans back on the idea of knowing what their goals and OKRs are to make sure that what you're trying to achieve aligns with them as well. And then I think one large piece as well is having an acumen just around how the company grows, how revenue is generated. I think any IC or even manager level employee who can link everything that they do back to a revenue number or a dollar number is that much more impactful. So understanding how this is going to impact top level initiatives for the company or for the business you're working on is really top of mind, and that's what links all of these teams. All of these teams are going to be held to some type of revenue number or some type of revenue impact, and being able to understand that at a high level just kind of brings everything full circle.
Great. And do you have any best practices for syncing with other teams in order to be in the same page?
Yeah, I think having clear project plans and transparent project plans is super important. So being able to show other teams what their impact is for their like one small role on a project or one initiative on a project, how it's going to impact the other teams working on the project, and how it's going to impact the end goal is huge. So communicating that early on and having that transparency, and then having regular check-ins. So sometimes it gets tedious with like a daily stand-up to give updates, but it's so useful, because the worst thing is when a blocker comes up and no one knows there's a blocker because no one's communicating. So I think communicating early, transparently as much as possible, and then communicating often across functions is really key to getting those projects done successfully and on time.
Awesome. And are there any resources that you frequently use that you would potentially recommend to others that facilitate this?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of just like communication resources, leaning into whatever your company is using, if it's Slack, if it's Google, if it's whatever, lean into those. But I also kind of just like to keep an eye on the industry as a whole to see what's new, what's coming, what other people are doing. So I lean into a lot of like blogs and podcasts that are talking about project planning and project management, product development, to understand what's kind of new in the industry and in the market. And then even following blogs that are like marketing and app specific. I think those are really useful, especially when they're coming from third parties. What new products are they coming out with that can aid in project planning and project implementation? And how can I utilize them and bring them to my team?
What would you say are your top of mind of like podcasts or resources that you're
Yeah.
now?
So at a high level, I mean, every morning I use my Google Home and I just like, you literally ask it, hey, what's the latest tech news? And it'll play a video and it'll give you, you know, what's top of mind. But I think, so I mean, I start my day with that all the time, looking at things like TechCrunch, but I think bringing it down to a lower level when we're talking about marketing specifically and app marketing, I rely on a lot of third parties like App Annie and even Ruckus and things like that that are talking about things that are current happening in my industry. A lot of ad networks that I work with on the client side, they will have a blog, and it's just it's really on topic for what's top of mind, and it even gives insight to like product roadmaps. So leaning into those I find really useful.
Any piece of advice you would give to other women in growth that you wish you've received early on?
I think I kind of talked about it before, but find a mentor. I think a mentor is going to be, you know, your best friend in terms of building out your network and just being able to ask questions and real world scenarios of what's going on in the industry, but also just educating yourself. I think taking kind of a humble approach. I think early on I could have been really, you know, discouraged by the fact of applying to Google, you know, 50 times and not seeing any traction. Just staying the course, being persistent, and being humble about the fact that you might need more knowledge, more information, more education before that role is ready for you. But doing that due diligence and sticking to the plan, I think works out well. And just always be a student. Everyone has something to learn in this industry. This industry is changing literally every day, and lean into it. Lean into it, educate yourself, and then bring that to the table wherever you are every single day.
Thank you for those words and your time, Stara.
Thanks, Grace.